Alright, so I've been in cold email for over 4 years, and in that time, I've helped hundreds of B2B tech companies book thousands of meetings, and when my agency crossed 7 figures, it was entirely from cold email. There was no ads, no content, no referrals, just the system. And we have multiple clients booking over 100 sales calls every single month with just cold email, consistently, month after month. So in this video, I'm going to give you the complete thing for free. From setting it up, the strategy, to the tools that we're going to be using, and how to implement AI to manage different parts of your cold email funnel. When you should use Claude, and when should you build your own agent. So by the end of this, you have everything you need to build and run a cold email campaign that actually books meetings, while having different AI agents manage it for you. This is probably 2 to 3 hours of content compressed into one single video. So grab a coffee, open up your laptop, and let's get into it. So before I get into the screen share, I want to give you the map, because when it comes to cold email, I like to break that into 4 different pillars. So infrastructure, data, copywriting, and operations. And let me break it down for you. Infrastructure first, because if you don't land in the inbox, nothing else matters. It doesn't matter how good your offer is or how good your copy if your email never gets seen. And then data, because you never know who you're actually talking to. And copywriting, because once you know who you're talking to, you need to say the right thing to them. And then operations, which is everything happens after you launch your campaign. How you handle replies, how you scale, how you keep improving. So I'm going to go into every single pillar, and for each pillar, we're going to talk about the concept, and then we're going to look into the demos and tools. So let's build it. Starting with the infrastructure. The first thing you need to do is make sure you have the right infrastructure in place, because if you don't land in a prospect's inbox, nothing else matters. One mistake that I constantly see from founders sending cold email for the first time is that they send from their primary domain. And this is cold email 101, but you always need to create secondary domains for your outreach, because if something happens to your domain's reputation, you don't want to risk being unable to communicate with your actual customers on your main domain. This is the idea. So let's say your company website is Cymate.io. So that's my agency website. And what you want to do is buy an additional 10 to 20 domains with similar names. So something like getcymate.io, highcymate.io, workwithcymate.io. And whatever variations make sense, then you redirect all of those domains back to your main domains. So if a prospect ever clicks through a secondary domain, it goes straight to your actual website. So there's never any confusion. Now, for each of those domains, you want to set up 2 to 3 inboxes. So let's say your name is Wesley. You want to create something like wesley@highcymate.io, wesley.h@workwithcymate.io, that kind of thing. Now, just to give you an example, this is a tool that I'm using that is managed my cold email campaign called Smartly. You can see that because I run an agency called Cymate.io, my secondary domain is runcymate.com, cymatecode.com, bcymate.com, all that kind of stuff. And because my name is Wesley, I want to have an email, something like Wesley at secondary domain, my last name at secondary domain, Wesley H at secondary domain, so on and so forth. This is to give you an example on how you should configure your infrastructure. Now, your secondary domain should look like your primary domain. Close enough to be credible, but different enough to be separate, right? So let's say my main domain is Cymate.io. Good secondary domains would be Cymate.co, getcymate.com, tryCymateteam.com, so on and so forth. And when you create your secondary domains, here are a few things you should avoid. Number 1 is number. So anything like Cymate123.com, because it looks very spammy. Avoid long names like Cymate-sales-outreach.com, because it's very ugly. And last but not least, try to avoid bad TLDs like .xyz, .info, .biz, because they are essentially spam magnets. So a good rule of thumb is stick to .com or .co, because they do have the best deliverability. You can also get away with .io, but it does get a little bit expensive. Now, once you create all these secondary domains, you want to make sure that you have the right DNS records set up as well. And when it comes to cold email, there are 3 types of DNS that you want to look out for. First is SPF, second is DKIM, and third is DMARC. Essentially, SPF tells the receiving servers which IPs are allowed to send email for your domain, and without it, your email is going to look suspicious and anyone could be spoofing from your secondary domain. Second is DKIM. So DKIM essentially adds a digital signature to your email. Basically, it proves that the email actually came from a reputation sender. Last but not least, DMARC. So DMARC essentially tells the receiving servers what to do if your SPF and DKIM fails. We can get a little bit technical, but it also lets you receive reports on every time you have an authentication failures, it will send that report to you. So just remember those 3 things: SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. Now, I'm going to show you how to create everything and how to automate the entire thing from scratch. You don't have to worry about all of this fancy terminology, but I'm going to share with you a few things that you can do so that you can get all of this set up for yourself without having to do anything manually. So you can purchase your secondary domains from services like GoDaddy or Pork Buns, but hang on to that, I'm going to show you an easier way to do it. Now, when it comes to creating secondary inboxes, there are three main ways to create those inboxes. So the first way is native. Essentially, you can set up your cold email infrastructure directly with Google or Outlook. It's going to be a bit more expensive and it's going to require some manual setup. So the second way that you can go about it is setting it up through a reseller. A reseller is essentially a service that buys inboxes from Google or Outlook and then resell that in bulk at a cheaper cost. So instead of paying $7 to $8 per inbox with Google or Outlook, you can actually get away with $3 or $3.5 per inbox with the reseller. And they essentially have similar, if not the same quality as Google or Outlook inboxes. Now, last but not least, you can also set it up with an SMTP server. Essentially, this is a private server that is not Google or Outlook. And if I have to give you a recommendation, I would go with the second option, which is resellers, because you can essentially save a lot on cost. And they typically automate all the setup that I mentioned to you earlier, like all the DNS records and all that kind of stuff. So you're going to save on setup time and cost. I personally like to go with the reseller because you can get access directly to Google and Outlook inboxes, and a few providers that I am using right now, so essentially InboxKit or Zapmail. I've been working with these two vendors for the past 4 years now and really haven't had any issues with that, so you can stick with my recommendation. I know a lot of people also use premium inboxes as well, so you can also go with that, but these are essentially the three recommendations that I want to give you. So either InboxKit, Zapmail, or premium inboxes. Now, if you want to go with an SMTP, I typically don't really like to work with SMTP because of performing reason. But if you had to choose one, I would recommend to go with something like Mission Inbox. They have higher reputation compared to everything else that we've been tested in the space. But yeah, stick with reseller. But if you want to go with an SMTP, go with Mission Inbox. All you have to do is create an account on this platform and they will help you do everything from purchasing the secondary domain to setting up the inboxes to setting up all the DNS records, and they will help you import to your warm-up tool as well. All right, let's talk a little bit about warm-up. So once everything's set up, you want to put all of your mailboxes into warm-up for at least 2 to 3 weeks, because essentially those secondary domains and inboxes are brand new, so you just cannot send cold emails right away. You're gonna go straight to spam. So during the warm-up period, the system essentially sends AI generated emails back and forth between your inboxes, between other people in your warm-up pool. So things like, hey, are you still up for lunch tomorrow? And then it will automatically respond with something like, sure, yeah, let's do it. Basically, the warm-up pool is going to send AI generated email to every single inboxes within that pool, and it makes sure that it sounds human, it sounds conversational, and eventually build up a standard reputation. Now, you want to leave those secondary inboxes and domains in the warm-up pool for at least 2 or 3 weeks, and longer if you can, but once they fully warmed up and mimicking a real human behavior, that's when you can start sending cold emails to your actual target audience. Now, when it comes to the warm-up process, there are 2 tools that you can use to help you configure this whole thing. So the first one is smartlead.ai. This is my personal favorite. This is something that I've been using for my agencies across 150 plus customers since the start of it. Or you can also use something like instantly.ai. So those are the 2 big players in the space. So essentially, once you purchase the inboxes and the domains from your reseller or from your SMTP, you can plug that into Smartlead or Instantly, and that will help you configure the whole warm-up process. Later on, when you start sending cold email, these are also the platforms that will help you set up the campaign and see all the replies that are coming in as well. So if you haven't yet, make an account with either Smartlead or Instantly. For the rest of the video, I'm going to stick with Smartlead, but just keep in mind that the setup is typically the same thing, just different UI. All right, now let's talk about configuration, and then we can go into the next pillar. Essentially, one question that I get asked a lot is how many emails you should send per day, per inbox. And for me personally, I want to keep it a little bit conservative. So typically I send about 10 to 15 emails per day, per inbox. So if you can see right here that these are my secondary domains, and I set the daily limit so that every single day this email is only going to send about 10 emails per day. Now you can push that up to 15 as well if you would like. However, I would not do anything more than 15. I know some people push it to 20 or 25 and they always run into deliverability issues. So stick with anything between 10 to 15. So let's reverse engineer this together. Now that you know when you want to send cold email, you have to set up a secondary domain and secondary inboxes. Each secondary domain can hold up to 3 inboxes, and each inbox can send up to 10 emails per day. Now, let's say that you want to send 150 emails a day. That's 5 domains and 15 inboxes. And to give you a sense of scale, every time we onboard a new client at my agency, we typically set them up with 35 domains and 105 inboxes, which usually gets you to around 1,000 emails a day. That's the bare minimum that we do. Some clients, they want to scale up, some clients, they want to scale down, but we would recommend that number to start off with. It should give you enough sending volume to do a bunch of different tests before you land on something that actually does work. We can talk about testing in a little bit, but if you are sending cold email for the first time, I recommend setting up about 100 inboxes. Now, on top of that, we also follow what I call a 20% rule. So because we already have 100 inboxes, we also create an additional 30 inboxes and about 10 domains as backup. Here's one thing to keep in mind. As you're constantly sending cold email, you are going to run into some sort of deliverability issues. So your goal is to not to avoid any issue in the future, but your goal is to build a system so that your pipeline is constantly running. So that's the reason why we have backup. Essentially, every single month, we would swap the backup batch to the least performing inboxes and email in a primary batch. So that way we are constantly cycling through the inboxes and you never have to worry about infrastructure again. So yeah, that's infrastructure. Make sure to get this right and everything else will have a chance to work. And if you get this wrong, it really doesn't matter what you do next. All right, now let's talk about data. This is the second pillar, and essentially it covers both finding the right people and getting accurate contact information for them. Here's the saying in cold email: your lead list is a message. What does that mean? Now, let's imagine that you have an incredible product, right? Let's say you've built something that could actually cure brain cancer. That's pretty amazing. Now, let's say you want to set up some cold email campaigns to reach out to people with cancer, and let's say you start reaching out to a bunch of people with breast cancer, right? It doesn't matter if you have an incredible product, no one is going to buy it if you're reaching out to the wrong people, right? If you're reaching out to the people that doesn't have the pain that you're looking to solve, it's just not going to matter. And this is where most people make the mistake, right? They pick a single tool, they put in a couple of filters, they get a lead list, and they just start blasting cold email to everybody in that list, right? Now, the problem is everyone else who is doing cold email is doing the exact same thing. They're doing it with the exact same tool, with the same filter. So these leads are getting hammered with messages from every single directions, and I essentially call this saturated data, right? Meanwhile, there are actually people and companies out there that nobody's emailing to them, right? Sitting with empty inboxes who actually have the exact same problem you can solve. Let me give you an example. So I'm going to go to a tool like Crunchbase. This is one of a very big database, and I want to search for a company like Spotify. I have it right here. Now, as you can see, Spotify is actually under something like audio, cloud computing, music streaming, podcasts, even though they are technically a tech companies, right? So let's say you want to reach out to tech companies and you just put in filter like tech companies, right? You're not going to get the data that you want, right? You're not going to get companies like Spotify, and they are just sitting there, no one's emailing to them. And one more thing to actually shout out, but a lot of databases out there, they claim that they have verified emails, but essentially when you grab a lead list from those databases, their emails are not actually verified. So every time you have a lead list, you always have to clean it up. You always have to double verify it just to make sure that you're not getting a high bounce rate. Because let's say someone changed their job, right, like 3 months ago, and they don't have the email anymore, and you still send email to them, you're going to get a bounce. And the more bounces you get, it's going to hurt your domain reputation. So all the secondary inboxes, all the secondary domains that you've built in the previous section, now they all went to waste. So I want to walk you through a workflow that you should follow so you don't run into these two issues. I want to show you a few tools that you can actually use, and last but not least, I'm going to show you how to automate the entire thing as well. I'm going to swing to the whiteboard here, and let's call this lead list building process. There you go. All right, so when it comes to building a lead list, there are essentially 4 steps that you should follow. So the first step that you want to do is find the company. And essentially, this is the company level, right? You want to find the company that are within your ICP. You want to find companies that are essentially similar to your best customers, right? People that you actually want to work with. People that you know for a fact that have the pain that you can solve. So let me run through a few databases that you can use depending on your purpose, but you can use something like Crunchbase that I shared with you earlier to find more generic databases. Something like Apollo could work as well. One of my favorite tools I've been using recently is called AI Org. Now, you can go with something more targeted and more specialized as well. So let's say you want to target e-commerce companies, you want to use something like MyLeadFox. If you want to target local businesses, you want to use something like LocalPipe. You can use something like Serper or D7 Lead Finder. Essentially, these are the tools that help you scrape Google Maps to get all the businesses that you can reach out to. There are some other databases like Buildwood. Essentially, you can check for a technology of a certain company to see whether or not they use that particular technology, or something like DareStack, which essentially can accomplish the same thing. I'm a big fan of DareStack. compared to builds with good. They typically give you more data. Or you can use something like clutch.co, essentially give you all the agencies that you can reach out to, right? Whether it's development agency, IT, marketing, design, so on and so forth. So yeah, just going back to my whiteboard, essentially that's the first step. You want to be very specific on the type of company that you want to reach out to. Now, once you have the company that you want to reach out to, you want to find the right person that you want to reach out to, right? Because CEO is going to have a different problem than a COO, right? This is essentially the account level. So you start with the company level first, and then you go into the account level, right? Now, here's a tip. If you have a service, you can sell directly to a CEO or some upper C-suite executive. They are going to buy that service if they don't have a person in the team handling that. So let's say you run an accounting firm, right? One of the best intent data that you can look for is whether or not they have a CPA or if they have like some kind of like tax financial advisor in the company. And if they do not, chances are they might need some sort of like CPA service. So, and if you want to sell a product, I would actually skip the CEO and go to the person who are in charge of using that product. So let's say you want to sell some kind of like DevOps SaaS, right? You want to go to the head of engineering, you want to go to the engineering manager, somebody that is actually using that tool, right? The CEO is not going to care about the product that can help you improve your quality assurance. They're not going to care about that, right? So go to the person who's in charge of using that tool if you're selling a product. That's a tip for you. Now, what tools should you use here? So previously, let's say you have a list of company, you can plug that company into something like AI Org, and it's going to give you all that data. So let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. So right now I am inside AI Org. I just logged in. What you can do is, let's say previously you have a list of other companies that you want to reach out to, right? Something like Spotify.com, Google.com, whatever you want to reach out to, right? You have that list of other company domains. What you can do is go to tools like AI Org. In the right hand side, you can click on company export, and then what you have to do is just upload that list, and then you can select the criteria like within all these companies. I want to reach out to people with, let's say, like 200 to 500 employees. I want to reach out to people with the company title of COO, whatever it might be, right? And what AI Org is going to do is essentially look at the list that you just uploaded and find all the contact information from the people that you want to reach out to. So the TLDR is you want to search for the company that you want to reach out first, upload that list into a tool like AI Org, and then use AI Org to help you find the person that you want to reach out to. Now, let me show you an advanced tip on how you can actually use something like Claude to actually pull out a lead list for you, right? So remember earlier I showed you all the tools, and most of the time these tools might have something like an API or an MCP. So these are essentially connectors that you can connect that to your AI platform like ChatGPT or Claude, so that you can start communicating with your AI to help you build that lead list. So let me show you an example on how this would look like. Now let's take AI Org as an example, but you can actually do this for every tool, right? As long as they have some kind of API documentation, or if they have some kind of MCP server that you can connect to, everything's fair game. So when I went into the MCP documentation, one thing I would see here is their URL, right? So this is the URL that you would need to connect to that tool. What you want to do is copy that. Now you're going to go into your Claude account, right? I have the desktop version, but you're going to go to your connector, click on the plus sign here, click on add custom connector, right? You're going to name it whatever you want. For this case, I'm going to name it like AI Org connector. I'm going to copy and paste the link that I just copied, and I'm going to replace this port right here with my API key. And if you don't know how to create an API key, simply just sign up for the platform. So again, just go to AI Org, make an account, and then it's going to help you generate an API key, right? The key is essentially your private key. This is something that only you can have access to. So when you generate an API key, make sure you save it, right? So just to show you exactly what I'm talking about, I'm in the AI Org platform now. There should be like an API section somewhere on the left-hand side. And then all you have to do is click on create API key right here, and then name the API key, and then it's going to give you an API key, right? So yeah, you're gonna paste that key in here. This will be like something random. Now, once you have something like that, I only have one, so I'm not gonna create another key. You're essentially connected to the tool itself right inside your Claude dashboard. And yeah, what you want to do is just give it a prompt, right? You can go to your co-work session, you can go to your chat session, whatever you want to do it. Say something like, hey, use the AI Org connector, find me 50 VPs of marketing and whatever your criteria is, and it should automatically pull out a lead list from you from these platforms. It's pretty cool, pretty fast, right? Now, is it going to be accurate data? Probably not. So what you want to do is essentially create a Claude skill for it and eventually start training the skill so that eventually over time it knows exactly what is your ICP, who do you want to target so that you can pull a better list over time after time, right? So yeah, essentially that's how you can use AI to build lead lists for you. But keep in mind that AI is not perfect. You're going to have to keep training the AI on your product so that it eventually can build a better list over time. All right, so now that you have the company, now you have the person contact information, the next thing you want is to enrich it. What does enrichment mean? So enrich means that let's say you have data from somebody and it has the person first name, last name, it got the company domain, but in some databases, unfortunately, it does not have their email. Enrichment process is essentially call another tool so that it can find that email from that person, right? Or you can use like an AI agent to like the web research, browse their LinkedIn profile to get their email. So that's what enrichment means. All right, so when you want to enrich your data, you want to use something like lead magic or you want to use something like ICPs. Essentially, when you have a lead list of the person's first name, last name, and the company's domain, but let's say you don't have the email, all you have to do is create an account, upload that list in here, and it should give you all those people contact information like email, LinkedIn, etc. Again, I'm going to show you how to automate this entire step later down the road, but let's get into the last part, which is verify. So once you have everything ready to go, the last step is make sure you verify that so that it doesn't bounce and just to make sure that you clean up the lead list a little bit. So to clean up your lead list, you can use something like Million Verifier or something like Bounce Man. Keep in mind that if you don't clean up your lead list, you're going to get a lot of bounces down the road, and that is going to hurt your domain reputation. It's going to cost you to having to redo your infrastructure from scratch. So don't skip this step. Make sure you always clean up your lead list before you send a single cold email. All right, now let's say this whole thing is a little bit complicated. I told you I'm going to show you how to automate this whole process. But essentially, you can use a tool like Clay to automate literally the entire process like this, right? So what is Clay? Clay is essentially a workflow builder, right? It's not a database, it's not going to help you get data. Well, it could, but people don't usually use it to get data, right? So Clay is like a workflow builder. Essentially, Clay has the ability to pull in a bunch of tools, like a bunch of API into one single platform. All you have to do is build this workflow once, and then every single time you have a new lead list, all you have to do is upload that into the Clay table, and they will automatically execute it every single time. So let me show you an example. So this is a Clay workflow that we built for a customer, right? So first, what we have is we have their first name, last name, company name, their role title, all that kind of stuff, right? Remember, this is the part where we use all the databases that I shared with you just now. Now in Clay, I can essentially send out an AI agent that can browse the company website. I can browse the LinkedIn to make sure that I am reaching out to the right company or anything like that. And the next part is the enrichment process, right? As you can see, some people won't have an email address. I would use something like Lead Magic or ICP to essentially enrich that information and find the contact information. Then I would want to double verify it using Million Verifier and Bounce Man just to make sure that I'm not getting any bounces. And yeah, that is the Clay table. That is the workflow that I build out just once. And then every single time I want to rerun a campaign, all I have to do is upload a new lead list inside this table right here, and it would execute the whole thing for me. So that's the data portion. Get this right, and you're talking to people who actually have the problem with accurate information instead of blasting a lead list that everyone else already burned through. All right. Let's talk about copywriting, and this is essentially the third pillar, one of the most important pillar in my honest opinion, because this is the strategy part. Because previously, the infrastructure is set up that essentially all you have to do is pick the right vendor to set everything up for you, upload that to a sequencing tool like Smartly or Instantly, and then data, essentially make sure you're reaching out to the right people. You can essentially train an AI to pull out a lead list for you, and over time it will automatically handle that portion. But the copywriting part is something has to come from within you. This is the creative part, and fair warning, most people are not very good at creative. So in this section, I'm going to show you how you should think about strategy, how you think about your offer, how you actually want to test, and most importantly, how you write a copy that sounds like human. And then, last but not least, I'm going to show you an AI agent who will essentially be the brain of your operation so that you can constantly test new things with a click of just a button. Cool. All right, let's talk about the strategy part first. All right, so when it comes to cold email copywriting, there are actually 3 different parts that you have to think about. This is very similar to other type of content like LinkedIn, like ads, but with every single cold email, you want to have 3 different sections in your copy. So hook, body, and CTA. Think of your cold email as a funnel itself, right? The first thing is the subject line. The goal of the subject line is so that they can open the email. And when they open the email, the first thing they're going to read is the hook. the only purpose of a hook is to get people to be interested in what you're talking about, to get them reeled in so they can keep reading your email and learn more about your offer. And when they get to the body, this is the part where essentially you can show them what you can accomplish, what are they missing out on if they don't work with you. And last but not least, that is going to funnel to a CTA. A CTA is a call to action. So you want to make sure your CTA is clear, you want to straight to the point, because an unclear CTA is going to get the prospect all confused, and even if they want to work with you, they don't know what the next step is, right? So you want to direct the prospect to either booking a meeting on your calendar or sign up to your platform or whatever you want them to do, right? So that's the three part of cold email copywriting. So hook, body, and CTA. So when it comes to the hook, essentially you want to talk about the pain point. You want to focus on the pain that they might experience, right? And this is the part where most people would use some kind of personalization. They would use an AI agent to go out there, do some research on the lead so they can personalize the first line accordingly. And that's how you can get their attention. Essentially, you want the hook to just talk about the pain, to kind of read them in and see whether or not they have the pain or if they want to even continue reading the rest of the email. So there's two concepts about the hook that I want to talk to you about. The first thing is poke the bear. This is a concept from Josh Braun. Essentially, what you want to do is kind of poke around to see if they experience the pain point, right? So a hook should be a one sentence on its own line. Essentially, it's a question asking them whether or not they are experiencing the pain. Something like, hey John, I was doing some research about XYZ, so I assume or I figure you might have this pain point. Question mark. So essentially this line is just poking around to see whether or not they have an issue. And here's a tip. You can literally just have a regular sentence. It doesn't have to be a question. Just throw the question mark at the end and that will become a question. So imagine if it says something like, you had breakfast this morning? You see how depending on my tone, it becoming a question, right? Even though the sentence itself, you had breakfast this morning, is not really a question. Same thing to cold email. If you write something and throw the question at the end, the prospect is going to automatically think that as a question. So keep that in mind. Talk about the pain and throw the question mark at the end. The second concept I want to talk about for the hook is a concept called why you, why now, right? So when you reach out to people in cold email, the first line of the sentence has to answer that question. Why are you reaching out to them and why now? So remember, when you go out there and use different AI agents to find different intents, different data point, why do you think they have a problem? Make sure you talk about that in the hook. Maybe you see something and that's why you figure they might have that problem. So that's the hook. Now, once the prospect find the problem relevant, they will continue reading your email. And essentially, this is the body. The body is when you test different outcome and guarantee and whatever you might have, right? Trial, all that kind of stuff. So when it comes to testing new offer, I'm going to go to my whiteboard now. There's a concept that I always follow when I try to help my client crack a campaign. There's really no name for it, but I usually call it the offer ladder, the positioning ladder, whatever it might be. So this is essentially how it should look like. So imagine you have a pyramid and essentially the more up you go, the less control that you will have. What does that mean? Now, let's take my agency as an example, right? We help other companies do cold email. We help them go to market and help them find product market fit. Now, that's what we do. We do cold email. So let's put this right here, cold email. When you try to come up with an offer, you don't want to talk about cold email, right? You want to talk about the outcome. You want to talk about what cold email can actually help the prospect accomplish. So let's start with the most obvious thing, right? So cold email can help you get more reach, right? Because you can scale cold email indefinitely and you can send a bunch of cold email. You can reach out to your entire target audience, right? Now, what does reach actually get you? Reach will get you leads, right? Because when you reach out to a bunch of people, some people might be interested in your product or service. And what does lead get you? Leads will get you clients, right? Because those leads will eventually convert into your actual paying customer. Your clients is going to get you more revenue, right? And your revenue is going to help you get better valuation, whatever it might be, right? So as you can see right here, it starts from reach to leads to clients, revenue, valuation. But here's the thing, just because you have some leads doesn't mean they will convert into clients. Just because you got clients doesn't mean you will be profitable. And just because you got some revenue coming in, you're profitable, doesn't mean that your valuation will be high, right? That because there's a lot of things involved with the company valuation. So yeah, as you can see right here, these are essentially what we call angles. So when you send cold email, you want to test all these angles to see which one resonate with your target audience. Why? Because let's say you're reaching out to a CEO, they might care most about more clients, they might care most about valuations. If you reach out to a CMO, for example, they might care more about reach, they might care more about leads, right? Now, let's say you're reaching out to a CEO that are doing below $1 million a year in ARR. They might care more about getting more clients, they might care more about getting more revenue. But let's say you're reaching out to a CEO that are doing somewhere between, I don't know, 10 million to $100 million, they would care most about valuation, right? So different stages of business, different people that you're reaching out to, they have a different set of pain point. They have different things that they care about. So that's the reason why you just have to test. You have to test with different role title. You have to test with different company stage, different industry. And then for all those, you have to test with different value proposition, right? Different angle, things right here, right? And once you land on something, that is your key signal to essentially scale up that particular angle, right? So this is the body, how you should map it. Just sit down and map the pyramid for your product or your service to see what you should test and what you should be focusing on. All right, so that's the body. Now, CTA, pretty straightforward. You want to end your email with a call to action, right? And a tip for this is you want to make it really soft, right? Obviously, most of the time, the goal is you want to push for a meeting, but you don't want to ask somebody for a meeting directly, right? One way that I like to think about it is like dating, right? Now imagine you go to your bar and you meet a girl and you're having a good time and you're talking to her throughout the night, and all of a sudden you're just like, hey, wanna go home with me? That just kind of ruined the whole thing, right? Now, let's say you want to make it a little bit more soft and you want to say something like, hey, look, like I got this really cool car collection at home. You want to go check it out with me, right? You're essentially implying that you want to take her back home, but you're just saying it differently, right? It doesn't make it too, I don't know, creepy. So with cold email, you want to follow the same principle, right? You want to book a meeting, but you don't want to say something like, hey, how about let's meet? How about let's, like talk about it on Zoom next week, right? You don't want to say something like that. You want to be soft and say something like, hey, I'd love to get your thoughts on it. Hey, if this is relevant, I would love to see if it makes sense for your company, right? Essentially, you are still asking for a meeting, but you make it soft and you are not, too straightforward with what you want to do. So essentially, you're not too direct pushing for a meeting right away, because that can come off as pretty pushy and people just don't like to be sold to. All right, so let's talk about copywriting framework, because there are a lot of copywriting style that people do, right? So my recommendation is you just need to go out there and find different framework, because there's a saying that you don't know what a good copy looks like until you see a good copy. But when in doubt, there is a framework that I personally developed called TFKD. Think, feel, know, do. So essentially, it's a 4-sentence cold email, each on its own line. The first sentence makes the prospect think about the problem. The second sentence makes the prospect feel about the problem. The third sentence explaining what they could do to solve the problem. And last but not least, the fourth sentence is a CTA. You make sure you want a client know what to do next, right? So here's an example. Hey Michael, since you're managing quite a few clients, I'm curious if anyone's asked about setting up a trust. This was quite difficult to do in the past, with lawyers charging a few $1,000s and taking weeks to finish. Our startup XYZ can help our clients set up trust in a minute, yada yada yada. We've partnered with case studies to make trust creation inexpensive and simple. Let me know if you're curious and I can set up a discount code for your client, right? As you can see, first line is the hook. This is where the personalization comes in, right? I've done research about the prospect. I know they're managing a few clients. So I want to poke the pain a little bit. I want to see if this problem is relevant for them. The body is this whole part right here, right? But this second sentence make the prospect feel about the pain point, right? This is a sentence that I want to let the prospect know that a product like ours exists. There is a solution out there that can solve the problem. And last but not least, a straightforward CTA. So yeah, those are essentially some copywriting psychology that you can apply. Now, let me show you a tool that is going to make your life a lot easier. All right, so what you're seeing right here is a tool called Octave. And essentially, Octave is an AI agent that can do multiple things. The first thing is it would look into your product or service. It would help you come up with different value propositions, different ICPs that you can reach out to. That is essentially the brain of your entire operation, right? Octave has all that context saved into one single place, so that later on down the road, if you want to try out different value proposition, you want to test out different angle, Octave knows all that context so that it can actually help you draft messages based on that. I don't want to make this whole video about Octave tutorials. So if you're curious on how I use Octave, just let me know in the comment. I can make some more videos about it. But essentially, when you go in here, you can create your own libraries, you can create your product, you're gonna answer a few questions about your product or the service, and then it's gonna save that as the memory. Now, inside Octave, there are multiple agents that you can do as well. So if I click on create agents, there's an agent to help you craft an email. There's an agent to help you enrich a person, enrich a company, do all that kind of stuff. There's an agent that helps you draft LinkedIn messages as well. Now, since Octave already knows about your company, knows about what pain point you're solving, know about what outcome you are looking to accomplish for your customers, you can eventually train the Octave agent to write copy a certain way as well, right? So you can train the Octave agent to use this kind of framework. If you wanted to only generate the first line, you can also train the agent to do that as well. So what you can do with Octave is remember the clay table that we built earlier. The clay table that has all the prospect information in there is all cleaned up. You have the lead list in here ready to go. Now, what you can do is you can call the Octave Agent API. So for every single prospect that you pulled out earlier, Octave is going to do research on that one single prospect, and it's going to draft the copy based on the research that it was able to come back with. So yeah, again, later on down the road, let's say if you want to test out a different angle, a different value propositions, all you have to do is know of that in Octave and say, hey, Octave, for this prospect right here, talk about this value propositions. Now, let's say that doesn't work, you can come back and be like, hey, Octave, let's change the value proposition to something else, and it will help you draft the copy based on that. Super cool AI agent, that's my favorite copywriting tool. It's not really a copywriting tool, but yeah, essentially that is the copywriting pillar. Get the structure right, get the copy right, use the right agent to help you do research and personalize it at scale with AI. And you're essentially sending emails that actually read like a person who wrote them. Because in a sense, you kind of did, right? You wrote the message, you make sure it sounds like human, but the system just helps you write that at scale. All right, last pillar, operation. And this is everything that happens after you launch a campaign. How you manage replies, how you scale, and how do you get a report that shows you all the statistics so that you know what to test. Inbox management first. So speed to leads is super important here. What you want to do is set up an automation using something like Make, Zapier, NAN that notify your team the moment there is a positive reply, right? Because based on our internal statistic, if you respond to a lead within 2 or 3 minutes, your booking rate actually go up by 20 to 30%. So let's say if you're currently getting about 100 meetings a month, that's potentially 130 meetings a month that you're missing out on. So just from responding faster, same leads, same emails, just faster follow-up. And if you want to take a step further, this is the part that I would recommend to start looking into building different AI agents. So let me show you an example that we did. Basically, this is a screenshot for disclaimer, but what you're seeing right here is a reply coming in from a lead. And essentially we have an AI agent that is trained on every single replies that we ever had, all the replies that produce ROI, that produce booked meeting, all that kind of stuff. And it knows exactly how to respond based on different categories. So let's say if the lead is interested, it will respond differently than if the lead is not interested. It will skip all of the out of office emails and all that kind of stuff. So you can build an AI agent like that, where essentially every time you get a reply, it will forward that message to Slack, and all you have to do is either approve or reject it. Or if you don't like the message, you can just write the message yourself and go into Smart Lead or Instantly and respond to the same lead. So yeah, speed to lead is very important. So we built out the entire AI agent in Claude Code that essentially did everything for us, send out the message in Slack, and all team have to do is either approve or reject it. Now, let's talk about scaling. When should you scale? When should you keep testing? And most people get this part wrong. They test random things, and the moment something seems kind of work, they just buy more inboxes. They dump off their marketing budget into the infrastructure. But this is the roadmap that we actually use. It's actually 3 stages: testing, optimizing, and scaling. So stage 1, testing. You want to launch as many campaigns as you possibly can. You want to target different ICPs with different value propositions and offer. So at this stage, don't worry so much about the tone, the subject lines, the CTAs. As long as you get everything correctly, as long as you follow all the best practices, right? Focus more on figure out which offer, figure out which positioning angles get the most positive replies. Now, let's say you get a few leads coming in, let's say you got a few meetings, a few signups coming in. You want to move on to stage 2, which is optimizing. And this is the part where you want to tweak your message a little bit. Now, let's say you have a long message, see if you can maybe make it a lot shorter, right? The shorter it is, the better. You want to tweak other things like your subject line, your CTA, your personalizations. The goal for this stage is consistency. So let's say you have a campaign that month after month that is getting you the same amount of positive replies, the same amount of interested leads, the same amount of booked meetings, then essentially you're done with this stage. That is when you can start scaling. So stage 3, scaling. Once you have something that is more consistent, you just have to sit there, do the math, and figure out how many emails you can actually realistically send every single day, right? And all you have to do is go buy more domains, make sure you have enough data, and scale everything proportionally using the infrastructure math that we covered earlier. All right, so this is almost like a benchmark, and do keep in mind that these are incredible campaigns, right? I've been doing cold email for myself for so long that these are very good numbers. Keep in mind that you're probably not going to get this number right off the bat if you're doing cold email for the first time. But I just want to show you what does a winning campaign look like. So the 2 numbers that you want to look into is essentially reply rate and positive reply rate, right? Reply rate tells you how many people responded to you, right? You don't want to track open rate. The reason being is open rate is actually very inaccurate. We've done a test in the past. We sent out like 5 simple emails at like 2 a.m. in the morning, and the open rate is like 100%, like literally a minute after that. So nowadays, there's a bunch of different AI that open your email, read the email as well. So don't track open rate. It's also going to hurt your deliverability because when you track open rate, it insert a 1x1 pixel in your email. And a good rule of thumb when you send cold email is you want to just send plain text. So yeah, TLDR, just don't track open rate. Reply rate, something should tell you whether or not your deliverability is good. So what you want to do is aim for somewhere between 2% to 1.5 at the bare minimum. That would tell you that eventually you're landing in the inbox, right? Now, when it comes to positive reply, you want to aim for somewhere between 20 to 30%. Once you have a campaign that is hitting around 20 to 30%, that's your indication that you should start scaling that up. So yeah, that's your report. Eventually, you can also build different AI agents that can send you all this report as well. So I'm going to show you 2 ways that you can go about it. So number 1, I'm showing you a demo in Smartly, but you can probably do this in Instantly as well. There's a feature called Smart Agents. Essentially right here, you can just describe what you want to do, like send you all the statistic every single day, every single week, look into which kind of ICP, which kind of persona are most likely responding to my email, and it will build an agent to send that report every day or every month. Now, another way that you can get a report is essentially through Smartly MCP, right? So this is essentially connecting Smartly to your favorite AI tools like either Claude, ChatGPT, whatever it might be. So if you watched the earlier section about data, it's essentially the same process. So what you want to do is go to Smartly MCP documentation. You're going to scroll down to this part right here. It's going to give you a little URL. You're going to copy that. Now, what you want to do is go back to your Claude connector, and very similar to how you added a tool from your dataset earlier, all you have to do is click on the plus button, Add Custom Connector. For here, I'm just going to name it something like Smartly MCP. Here, I'm going to copy and paste the URL link, and then all you have to do is replace your API key here. So essentially, when you go back to your account, click on this button, click on API key management, and then create an admin key, right? So copy this key, go back to your Claude, and then just paste that API key in here. I only have a connector, so I'm not gonna do it again. But essentially, once you have that set up, you can go to your Claude Cowork, Claude Chat, ChatGPT, again, your favorite AI tool. And all you have to do is really ask this question, right? You can say something like, hey, for the month of March, look at all the leads that responded to me who are more likely to give me a positive or like an interest response, right? You can combine that with different tools like earlier. Remember when we connect to the AI Art connector, right? We just simply tell Claude like, hey, use the connector, find me all these people within this criteria, right? And in here, you can eventually say things like, great, now add that to my campaign, right? You can combine different connectors together. You can also do things like set up a schedule set, right? So every single day, it's going to send you a report gathered directly from Smartly every single morning, so you know exactly what to look for, whether or not you should continue the campaign or should we adjust the strategy accordingly. So yeah, that's the entire complete system broken down into 4 different pillars: infrastructure, data, copywriting, operations, in that order, with AI built into almost every single step. Now, cold email is freaking simple, but it's not easy. There's a lot of small details across all 4 pillars, and getting one of them wrong can actually quietly tank everything else. And I want to be honest, even for us, it took time to get this fully dialed in, but once it's actually running, it runs. We've got clients consistently booking over 100 sales calls a month off this exact system. So if you watch this whole thing and you want to go deeper in any of these 4 pillars specifically, I'm going to be making dedicated videos on each one, so subscribe so that way you don't miss on those. And if you're trying to do this yourself and it's not working the way you want, or if you just want a team to build and run this for you, links in the description. We work primarily with B2B tech companies and startups, and after getting results for literally hundreds of clients, seriously, check out our case study website. I'm confident enough to say that if we don't hit the numbers that you want, we'll keep working for you for free until we do. As always, eyes on the stars, always rooting for you, and I'll see you in the next one.